The night was quiet, too quiet for the downtown corporate district. Jonathan Carter, billionaire founder and CEO of Carter Tech, walked briskly toward his black BMW, the late-night chill biting through his tailored suit. At 52, he had built an empire worth $220 million from the ground up. Tonight, all he wanted was to drive home, pour himself a glass of scotch, and get a few hours rest before the biggest meeting of his career. But just as he reached for the car door, a sharp, high-pitched voice sliced through the silence. "Shut up, don't say a word." Jonathan froze, his hand still gripping the keys. He turned his head, scanning the empty parking lot. The voice had come from inside his car. He bent slightly, peering through the tinted glass. In the shadows of the back seat, a small figure shifted, a little black girl no more than 7 years old. Her knees were pulled tightly to her chest, and her eyes, wide with fear, glistened under the dim light. Jonathan's brows knitted. "Who are you, how?" "SHHH?" She lifted a trembling finger to her lips, then pointed toward the towering Carter Tech headquarters behind them. "They're listening," she whispered. "Your partner and his blonde wife, they said you'd be here right about now." Jonathan's pulse spiked. His partner, his blonde wife. The only blonde woman close to him in business was Diana Sloan, his executive assistant of 10 years, a woman he'd trusted with his schedule, his accounts, and at times his personal life. And his partner, Marcus Hale, had been at his side for 15 years. "How did you get into my car?" Jonathan asked quietly, sliding into the driver's seat without making sudden movements. "The cleaning lady left it unlocked," she said matter-of-factly. "I hid when I saw them talking about you upstairs." Jonathan's mind whirled. This girl was street-smart. Her gaze darted constantly, scanning shadows even as she spoke. Her clothes were worn and smudged with city grime, but there was a spark in her eyes that made her seem far older than 7. "They said tomorrow you won't be the owner of anything anymore," she continued. Jonathan's stomach dropped. Tomorrow was the $400 million merger meeting with Japanese investors, a meeting Marcus and Diana had meticulously prepared for, or so he had thought. "What else did you hear?" he asked, pretending to check his phone while studying the glowing office windows on the 10th floor. "They said you're stupid and you'll sign papers without reading." The blonde lady laughed and said, "The day after tomorrow you'll have to start looking for a new job." The girl paused, curling in on herself. "They said other nasty things too, but my grandma always told me not to repeat bad words." Jonathan felt an unexpected surge of pride and anger, pride at the girl's courage, anger at the betrayal she just described. "What's your name?" "Jasmine," she said softly. "And you're Jonathan Carter. I heard them say it over and over." Her eyes narrowed. "Are you going to call the police now?" For the first time in weeks, Jonathan smiled, not the polished corporate smile he wore in boardrooms, but something genuine. "No, Jasmine, in fact, you may have just saved everything I've worked for." Through the rearview mirror, he saw lights flicker off in the building. Marcus and Diana were probably on their way down, smug and confident. They thought they were days away from removing him completely. They had no idea he now had an ally, an unlikely 7-year-old ally who had just bought him the most valuable currency in corporate warfare: time to prepare. As Jonathan drove out of the parking lot, the city lights glinting off the BMW's hood, his mind was already racing with plans. But a nagging question clung to him like static: why would a child risk so much for a stranger? The answer, he suspected, would change far more than just his business. They rode in silence for several blocks before Jonathan spoke again. "Did they say anything else?" Jasmine nodded, her voice low. "The blonde woman said you trust them like a good little dog, but tomorrow you'll find out little dogs sometimes bite." The cruelty of the remark struck Jonathan harder than he expected. 15 years of partnership, 10 years of friendship, and to them he was nothing but a pet, obedient and disposable. "Where do you live, Jasmine?" She shrugged. "Nowhere in particular, sometimes the shelter, sometimes the street, depends if there's space or if the other kids aren't being jerks." Jonathan stopped at a red light and looked directly at her. "Why tell me? You don't even know me." Her gaze was steady, far too mature for her age. "Because I know what it's like when people think you're invisible. They were talking about you like you're nothing." Her voice grew firmer. My grandma always said, when you see someone getting stepped on and you can help, you help, because next time it could be you. Jonathan stared at the traffic light, unmoving even after it turned green. A billionaire CEO was being schooled in humanity by a child. 20 minutes later, they were seated in a near-empty diner. Jasmine devoured a hamburger like she hadn't eaten in days. Jonathan nursed a cup of cold coffee, pretending not to notice how quickly she ate. His phone buzzed. Marcus. Marcus, ready for tomorrow, buddy. The Japanese will love our proposal. You're going to retire rich. Jonathan tilted the phone toward Jasmine. She snorted. He's lying to your face and acting friendly about it, bold. Marcus had always been like that, polished, charming, disarming. Diana too, the kind of people you trust with your life until you discovered they'd been slowly stealing it. Another message popped up. Diana, Jonathan, I've reviewed the final contracts. Everything's perfect, trust me as you always have. The words dripped with false warmth. Diana knew his schedule better than he did. She knew where he kept critical documents. She had access to every account. Do they know things about you? Jasmine asked between bites. They know everything, Jonathan admitted quietly. Bank codes, private files, years of company data. Jasmine swallowed, then said with unnerving calm, then you must know things about them too. Jonathan froze mid-sip. She was right. 15 years of working side by side meant he'd seen things, small irregularities in Marcus' dealings, the self-approved bonuses Diana thought no one noticed, conversations half overheard when they thought he wasn't listening. You have a sharp mind, Jasmine. She smiled faintly. When you have nothing, you learn to notice everything. Jonathan's phone rang again. Marcus. Jonathan? Marcus's voice was warm and falsely cheerful. Glad you're resting. Tomorrow's a big day. All you have to do is sign where Diana points. Trust me, we've handled everything. Jonathan's voice was calm, but his eyes were like stone. I'll be there. When he hung up, Jasmine tilted her head. You're planning something, I can see it in your eyes. She was right. The trap they'd set for him had just become the noose he'd hang them with. By the next morning, Jonathan's plan was forming in sharp detail. Jasmine was curled up on his couch under a blanket he'd found in the guest room. At 6:15 a.m., another message arrived from Diana. Diana, I've been at the office since 5 a.m. The Japanese arrive at 2 p.m. Just sign where I tell you, as always. Jonathan's jaw tightened. Jasmine, he said softly, I need your help again. Can you go back to the building and listen for more? That's dangerous, she said instantly. I know, Jonathan replied. That's why I'll have someone protect you. There was one man who came to mind, Gabriel Cross, a former private investigator Jonathan had once hired for due diligence on high-profile clients. Marcus and Diana had pushed him out last year, citing budget cuts. Now Jonathan suspected they'd wanted him gone because he was too observant. When Gabriel answered the phone, his voice was dry but amused. Carter, didn't think I'd hear from you again. Your firing wasn't my decision, Jonathan said, and I need your skills back urgently. 2 hours later, Gabriel sat at Jonathan's kitchen table, his sharp eyes assessing Jasmine with interest. So this little detective cracked open a $200 million conspiracy. He shook his head in disbelief. She's got talent, Gabriel added. Jasmine grinned. Grandma always said when you have nothing, you learn to listen to everything. Then Gabriel slid a tablet across the table. While you were getting rescued by this kid, I've been doing my own digging. Marcus and Diana aren't just backstabbers, they're thieves. And the merger, it's a front for laundering money. They've stolen over $5 million in the last 2 years through shell companies. They need your signature to make it all look legal. Once you sign, they'll cut you out. Jonathan's blood went cold. This wasn't just betrayal, it was organized crime. By the time the sun set, the three of them, Jonathan, Jasmine, and Gabriel, were outlining a counterattack. Jonathan would walk into that meeting as the man they thought was about to be ruined, but leave as the man who ended their careers, their freedom, and their reputation. And the beauty of it, they would never see it coming. Jonathan woke before dawn, the city still wrapped in the blue hush of early morning. For the first time in years, his mind felt razor sharp, no hangover from late-night work, no fog from corporate politics, just clarity. Jasmine was still asleep on the couch, curled up like a kitten under the thick blanket. Gabriel was at the dining table, sipping coffee and tapping away on his laptop. "They're going to play it friendly," Gabriel said without looking up. "Smile, shake your hand, talk about teamwork while they're sharpening the knife behind their backs." Jonathan poured himself black coffee. "Let them, today they're walking into my game." Gabriel smirked. "You ready for what comes after? This is going to get messy. Cops. Cops, lawyers, maybe the press." Jonathan took a slow sip. "Messy is fine, losing my company is." A small voice broke the tension. "What about me?" Jasmine had sat up, her hair sticking up in soft curls. "Am I still helping?" Jonathan crouched beside her. "Yes, but this time you're not going anywhere near danger. You'll be here with Gabriel's backup plan." Her brows furrowed. "Backup plan?" Gabriel leaned back in his chair. "We're setting up a live feed from the meeting room. You'll watch and listen in real time. If anything changes or if they try something unexpected, you send Jonathan a message. Fast." Jasmine's eyes lit up. "So I'm like mission control." Jonathan smiled. "Exactly." Jonathan was in his office, the air tense with the kind of fake calm that always precedes corporate betrayal. Down the hall, he could hear Diana's voice, cheerful, brisk, giving instructions in that always in control tone. She walked in without knocking, as she always had. "Morning, Jonathan, big day." She was dressed immaculately in a cream suit, pearls glinting at her neck. "Marcus is already with the Japanese team, going over the finer points. I've got the contracts ready for your review, but no need to stress, I've already triple-checked everything." Jonathan gave her his warmest fake smile. "I appreciate that, Diana. I'll go over them myself just to be thorough." For a brief second, something flickered in her eyes, annoyance maybe, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "Of course," she said sweetly, "I'll leave you to it." The moment she was gone, Jonathan picked up his secure phone and called Gabriel. "She's nervous," Jonathan said. "Good, that means she knows she's on borrowed time," Gabriel replied. Jasmine sat in Jonathan's penthouse living room, headphones on, eyes glued to the tablet. The live feed showed the gleaming boardroom, floor-to-ceiling windows, a massive oak table, and the skyline glittering beyond. She could see Marcus shaking hands with the Japanese delegation, all smiles and deep bows, while Diana busied herself arranging folders at Jonathan's seat. "They're setting you up?" Jasmine's voice crackled softly in Jonathan's earpiece. "Diana just slipped an extra document under the one you're supposed to sign. She's sliding it so it lines up perfectly. If you sign both pages, you're done." Jonathan's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Copy that." The meeting began. "Jonathan," Marcus's voice boomed warmly as he entered. "Glad you could make it. Let's show our guests how CarterTech does business." Jonathan shook hands all around, his demeanor calm but his eyes sharp. The first half of the meeting went as planned: polite introductions, discussions about projections and market potential. Diana clicked through a presentation like the efficient assistant she'd always been. Finally, she slid the contracts toward him. "Jonathan, if you could just sign here and here." Jonathan leaned forward, pen in hand, then paused. "I have a small addition before I sign," he said pleasantly. Marcus's smile didn't falter, but Jonathan saw the faint tightening at the corners of his mouth. "Addition." Jonathan reached into his briefcase and pulled out a separate document. "This is a last-minute clause I had my legal team draft this morning. Standard protocol, it ensures that all parties present today are in full compliance with financial disclosure laws." Diana's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. "That's not necessary, Jonathan, we've already." "Oh, it's very necessary," Jonathan cut in smoothly. "I wouldn't want anyone here caught in misunderstandings later." The Japanese investors exchanged curious glances. Marcus forced a laugh. "Of course, whatever makes you comfortable." Jonathan slid the clause across the table. "Then you won't mind signing it first." Gabriel had drafted the clause to include a legal acknowledgement, one that bound Marcus and Diana to full accountability for all past and present financial dealings tied to the merger. Once they signed, they couldn't later claim ignorance or shift blame. It was essentially a confession in legal form. Jonathan watched as Diana hesitated, her pen hovering. "Problem?" he asked softly. Her smile was tight. "No, of course not," she signed. Marcus followed, though his jaw was tight. "Excellent," Jonathan said. "Now I'll sign your contract." The meeting wrapped with polite applause and handshakes. The Japanese team left satisfied, believing the deal was moving forward smoothly. As soon as they were gone, Marcus turned to Jonathan, his voice low but sharp. "What the hell was that?" Jonathan leaned back in his chair. "That, Marcus, was me making sure I don't end up in prison for your little side projects." Marcus's face darkened. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I think I do," Jonathan replied, sliding a folder toward him. Inside were printed records, wire transfers, shell company names, timestamps, all gathered by Gabriel over the last 48 hours. Deanna's face went pale. "You've been moving millions through fake vendors, hiding it inside the merger paperwork," Jonathan said evenly. "If I'd signed without that clause, you could have cut me out and left me holding the bag. But now," he tapped the signed clause, "now you're just as exposed as I am." The next move happened fast. Within an hour, Gabriel had sent everything to Jonathan's trusted contact in the district attorney's office. Jasmine, watching from the penthouse, saw Marcus and Diana leave the building separately, their faces tight with barely contained fury. "They're scared," she reported. "Good," Jonathan said. "By tomorrow they'll be terrified." Jonathan returned home to find Jasmine sitting cross-legged on the couch, a bowl of popcorn in her lap. "How'd it go?" she asked eagerly. Jonathan smiled, a real smile this time. "Let's just say they won't be sleeping well tonight." Jasmine grinned, then turned serious. "So, what happens now?" Jonathan sat beside her. "Now we let the law do its job, and you get a safe place to stay, permanently." Her eyes widened. "You mean with you?" "If you want," Jonathan said softly. "I think your grandmother would be proud of you today." For the first time since he'd met her, Jasmine looked like the child she was, hopeful, vulnerable, a little shy. "Yeah," she whispered, "I think she would too." Jonathan glanced toward the city skyline, the weight of the day settling over him. The company was safe for now, but something told him this wasn't over. Marcus and Diana weren't the type to go quietly. And if they came back for revenge, they'd find he was ready. Because this time he wasn't fighting alone. For 2 days, Jonathan waited for the inevitable counterattack. He knew Marcus and Diana well enough to expect it, the kind of people who couldn't accept defeat, especially when their pride was wounded. By the third night it came. Jonathan had just finished dinner with Jasmine when Gabriel called. His tone was clipped. "They're making a move. I've got eyes on Marcus." He met with a man in a gray sedan, no plates, tinted windows. "My guess, hired help." Jonathan's stomach tightened. "Help for what?" Gabriel's voice was flat. "Either to scare you or to make you disappear." Jonathan's gaze drifted to Jasmine, who was curled on the couch watching cartoons, oblivious. A soft clink echoed from the balcony, too deliberate to be the wind. Jonathan moved silently to the kitchen, retrieved the heavy flashlight from the drawer and stepped toward the sliding glass door. In the darkness outside, a shadow shifted. Then a man in black dropped silently onto the balcony floor. "Wrong address," Jonathan said coldly. The intruder froze just as Gabriel emerged from the hallway, gun drawn. "Don't move." The man didn't fight, he simply smirked. "They said you'd be stubborn." They, Jonathan asked, though he already knew. "Your friends," the man said, "the ones you betrayed." Jonathan's jaw tightened. "No, they betrayed me." The police had the intruder in cuffs. Evidence tied him to Marcus's offshore accounts, clear proof that Marcus and Diana were desperate enough to turn corporate war into something far darker. The next morning, Jonathan and Gabriel met with the district attorney. Charges were filed. Arrest warrants were issued. By noon, Marcus Hale and Diana Sloan were in custody. The story splashed across every major business news outlet. Corporate power couple arrested in $5 million laundering scheme, betrayal at Cartertech. The fallout was instant. Cartertech's board voted unanimously to remove Marcus and Diana from all positions. The Japanese investors, impressed by Jonathan's quick action, doubled down on the merger under terms that kept Jonathan firmly in control. That evening, Jonathan and Jasmine sat in the penthouse, the city glowing below. "You're safe now," Jonathan said. Jasmine looked at him thoughtfully. "And you're safe too." He smiled. "Because of you." She shrugged. "Grandma always said if you can help, you help." Jonathan nodded slowly. Then I think your grandma would approve of what I'm about to say. I want you to stay here, go to school, have a real home. Her eyes widened. For real. For real. She smiled so wide it could have lit the whole city. Jonathan stepped out onto the balcony, the cool night breeze brushing his face. The war was over for now, but his life had changed forever. He still had his company, his reputation, his freedom. And somewhere in the middle of a dark parking lot on a quiet night, he'd found something far more valuable, a reason to fight not just for business but for people. He turned back to Jasmine, who was laughing at something on TV. And for the first time in years, Jonathan Carter felt something unfamiliar: peace. If you enjoyed this story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget, hit that subscribe button so you never miss the next big twist.